Greetings one and all, this is Ryan here.
And this is other Ryan here.
And we would like to welcome your eyes to a brand new series we have labelled Game Analysis.
In this series, we will be going through some of the popular franchises and bringing to light some background stories and strange mysteries that we, or you, the community, may have found.
In today's episode, we'll be focusing on the very popular Five Nights at Freddy's as a final goodbye to our theory-based work on the game. It's been one heck of a ride, and we've enjoyed every moment of it.
Let us know what other games you would like us to analyse down below. And with that being said, let's get on with the theory. So the first thing it's worth knowing is what the term nightmare actually means. After all, considering the name choices for the characters and also the general vibe of the game, it's very clear both are closely entwined.
Nightmare. A nightmare is a dream occurring during rapid eye movement sleep that results in feelings of strong terror, fear, distress, or extreme anxiety.
This phenomenon tends to occur in the latter part of the night and oftentimes awakens the sleeper who is likely to recall the content of the dream.
Over the past couple of months, Five Nights at Freddy's has consumed any proud theorist's mind space, frantically trying to piece together the story and also work out what makes these animatronics and elusive purple guy tick.
There have been some rather interesting and hard-proving theories, and let's admit, some rather questionable ones also. But hey, if you listen really carefully, you can hear a dog barking in FNAF 4.
No other Ryan, let's just admit we were wrong.
Okay, fine.
After the king of theorists known as MatPat made a compelling theory about the child representing either the puppet or Golden Freddy, many of us were prepared to settle. However, during Game Theorists Live, Scott decided to throw an animatronic-sized spanner in the works. From posing a question about the tiny toy Chica beak in the Night Free minigame of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 to giving statements about shadows being easily misunderstood in the mind of a child.
Scott wanted us to solve the game, and yes, these questions and statements were rather blunt and seemed pointless at first, but overnight the cogs of logic started to turn in all of our minds, and YouTuber Razbowski posed the idea that FNAF might just be one big dream.
Oh come on, you really expect us to go through 4 games putting our brains into overdrive until smoke is pouring out of our ears just to be told that none of the first 3 games mattered?
Actually, yes, but hear us out.
Let's really think about Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Now, I mean really think. Do you really think these guys are real? Would you really want to mingle with these animatronics if they were? These guys look like the final project of an evil scientist.
Oh come on Ryan, all they want is a hug. The jump scares prove that.
Anybody with common sense will know that these animatronics are the exaggerated nightmares of the child we control in the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 minigames. The only evidence we need for this is a quote taken directly from the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 trailer. What is it that you think you see? Remember this quote for later, as it sums up the entire theory.
It's all in your mind. 4 games, 1 story.
Today, we'll be discussing why Five Nights at Freddy's 1 through 3 was nothing more than the exaggerated imagination of a child, and how Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is the only true story to the series.
That's right. Move over, MatPat. There's a new sheriff in town. Wait, what are you guys doing? No, we were joking. Guys, stop!
In all seriousness, we love you, MatPat, so with that said, let's move on to the video.
Before we begin getting into the juicy theory, we first want to establish the basic story of Five Nights at Freddy's 4.
The story is based around this child who must carry onions in his pocket or something because this guy will not stop crying!
It's okay, buddy. Here, have a banana. Okay, fine, don't take it. Not even Santa Claus dressed in an Easter Bunny costume could make this kid happy.
It's okay though. If we had a brother who tormented us day in day out with that mask that gave me nightmares, I'd probably be the same. Shame on you, brother. Shame on you.
The child we are playing as, like we said previously, is tormented by what we know to be this child's brother and friends, from being locked inside the parts and services room to being lifted into Fredbear's mouth and crushed.
All in all, the story seems to revolve around the infamous Bite of 87.
Or you mean the Chomp of 83?
Let's not get into that right now. That's coming soon.
So why is this child so tormented? We can see he has a Freddy Fazbear plushies and even goes as far as calling them his friends. So where does the fear factor come into this?
Five Nights at Freddy's 4 Night 3 gives us this answer. Most kids who you speak to on this night will say something that would trigger an emotional response of fear into the mind of a young child. From saying the employees will kill you and hide your bodies in suits to being mocked for crying, getting called a baby.
Mix this in with constantly being scared by somebody wearing one of the animatronics masks, and eventually it will lead to the child being conditioned to respond with fear whenever relating to these characters. Take that, Pavlov!
So why is everyone so confused if this game concludes the storyline? Well, When we try to piece together with all of the facts we know about Five Nights at Freddy's 1 through 3, it just doesn't feel right. Certain things don't add up.
For example, why do we see this girl playing with these toy animatronics if we are supposedly in the year 1983 from the Easter egg we find in the child's house? And that being said, how is this the Bice of 87 if the year is 1983? Why are we told about a party in the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 establishment if it took place in a completely different location? Why, Scott? Why?
Okay, calm down, Other Ryan. There is an answer to all of these questions, but don't think you can't solve it just because the story is too complex. You just need to look at the story with a fresh pair of eyes. Remember the quote we told you to remember at the start of the video.
What's that? You don't? Oh, okay, hang on, we'll wait. Remember now? Good.
What is it that you think you see? It appears Scott's final push has landed us closer to the truth than we ever have been before, so prepare to have your minds blown!
First thing we need to realise is we missed something very crucial in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Think back to Five Nights at Freddy's 1 to 3. The games followed the same pattern. You beat the night and are introduced to the mini-games that reveals part of the Five Nights at Freddy's storyline. However, we were not given time to form an emotional bond with any of the characters on the screen.
Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was the only game in the series that made us form an emotional connection with the character we were playing as. We played as the same character through each minigame and experienced the trauma this child experienced. And if you say you didn't get teary from the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 Night 6 minigame, then you, sir or madame, have no heart.
Now we know in the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 secret games we play as these different characters, but we didn't really form a connection with these guys. This was more of a sequence of events that had to be done in order to unlock a secret good ending.
The reason we connect emotionally with this child is because throughout the game he is crying. Even from the get-go we are locked in a room surrounded by the distant sound of an evil laugh. We straight away side with this character because naturally as humans, we show empathy and see sadness as an imbalance and wish to comfort whoever it might be who is actually upset.
We soon learn that this character is being crippled with fear. We have to know that fear usually inhibits an exaggerated imagination, hence why after each night we are thrown into this nightmare. This child is constantly under distress and fear every waking moment we play as him, meaning it is buried deep inside his subconscious, which allows access to the nightmares he experiences.
As Scott teased to us on GT Live, there are 4 games but only one story. Matt, Pat and ourselves were very confused by this statement as we thought that it was obvious. However, what Scott meant by this is there are 4 games and only one of the stories within those games is perceived as the true story of Five Nights at Freddy's.
The story we are being told is the story of this crying child. Something that is referenced throughout the series multiple times, from posters of crying children to dead sprites of children with crying lines running down their face.
Now, you may be thinking, what about Five Nights at Freddy's 1 to 3? Do they have any significance at all? What about the minigames and the purple guy?
Now, prepare for the horrifying truth. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 to 3 was nothing more than the imagination of a distraught child experiencing vivid hallucinations and horrific nightmares.
Now wait, before you throw that chair at us, just hear us out. Ask yourselves, does any of the Five Nights at Freddy's games up until now make any sense? Really, ask yourselves.
Let's start with the first Five Nights at Freddy's. This was the first game we were introduced to these suit-stuffing animatronics. We are told our job role, we have to monitor the cameras and make sure the animatronics don't escape as they are left on a free roaming mode at night to stop their servos locking up.
Here's a quick suggestion. Lock the front doors and invest in a security booth outside the establishment. I mean, we don't really care about the establishment, right? From the sounds of the kitchen, we can safely assume damage is being done and we still let them wander around. So what specifically is the point of our job? To not get killed? Jeez.
Think back to Five Nights at Freddy's 4, there is something eerily familiar with this layout, isn't there? We have a door on the right and a door on the left. Bonnie attacks from the left, Chica attacks from the right, and unless you keep an eye on Freddy, aka the Freddles, he will attack without warning.
We also need to think about Foxy. Once he gets inside your room, there are different warning stages which let you know when he is close to attacking, kind of like Pirate's Cove. Let us tell you that that is not a coincidence.
Also, think about the conditions of this pizzeria. It almost has an abandoned feel to it, would you not agree? And also, how is it that the establishment changes around when viewing it multiple times?
The answer? It's not real. Think of the mechanics. If an animatronic is in the hallway, if they go near the door, we have to close it. Exactly like Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Does this not feel odd to you?
Want even more evidence? Let's think about the Easter eggs we can discover in this game. Most of them consist in the East Hall. We can see posters of a crying child. Now let's think about this crying child. Anyone who has played Five Nights at Freddy's 2 would straight away compare these posters to the child who was killed in the Give Cake to the Children minigame. But alas, this poster is not referring to this child. It is in fact a self-reflection of the child who is imagining this.
What other Easter eggs can we discover down this hallway? It's me. If you haven't guessed already, this is meant to be taken literal. It's you, the crying child. You are projecting your thoughts and fears, creating this establishment and these characters' motive to kill you. It's all in your mind.
Even without the Easter eggs in this location, we can see posters of the gang with the words "party time" written on them. What party could they be referring to, I wonder?
And what camera does this all take place in? Cameras 4A and 4B. 4. Five Nights at Freddy's 4, anyone?
Now, it is a shot in the dark to suggest Scott already had 4 games planned out in his head, but the evidence is so overwhelming.
But what about the characters? If this is the imagination of the child in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, then why do we see these characters?
The answer lies within the child's room. We can see the plushies in the bottom left-hand corner, which he calls his friends. If they are his friends, then why would he see them as dangerous?
Well, you have his brother's friends to thank for that, polluting his mind with fear. Speaking of the plushes, do you see anything odd about them? More precisely, the Foxy plush?
He is missing his head. Some may say he is unusable. Out of order even.
Foxy is the only animatronic to be labelled out of order, and we don't really understand why this is.
Could we possibly suggest that the only reason Foxy is out of order is because it is the only one of the child's toys to be missing a head? We also know the child's family to favour this Foxy's head when scaring you. Isn't it strange how we eventually find out that Foxy is the phone guy's favourite?
Did you ever see Foxy the Pirate? Oh wait, Foxy.
This would explain why. Foxy is considered the favourite in the household.
Now we pose you the question. So, do the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 occur after Night 5 of Five Nights at Freddy's 4? Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is the only game to reference the Bites of 87, and the fact that the phone guy states how long this child lives is represented by the items we can sometimes encounter next to the child's bed in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Pills, a vase of flowers and an IV bag, all the things you would find at the bedside table in a hospital.
Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is the game that is meant to take the nightmares of the child we play as and exaggerate them an extreme amount. This game is the birthplace of everything in Five Nights at Freddy's.
So technically speaking, without Five Nights at Freddy's 4, the rest of the games wouldn't exist. So with the evidence given to us, can we suggest that the Five Nights at Freddy's 1 game was nothing more than a nightmare derived from the ever-growing fear of the crying child?
Now with this question out in the atmosphere, we also have to ask you, was Five Nights at Freddy's 2 even real? To even fathom this idea, we must return to the question Scott posed to us during MatPat's livestream. And yes, these are 100% real.
In the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 minigame, why would the tiny toy Chica be missing her beak?
This question does in fact have an answer, and we can find this in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. But first, we must refer back to the minigame Scott is referring to.
At the end of Night 3 in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, we are introduced to a minigame in which we can exit the establishment and explore the outside world. There are many children in this minigame who seem to do nothing else but mock and tease you. After passing the laughing child, we have an option to go up a screen. This leads us to said character that Scott was referencing.
If we look closely, we can see Chica's beak on the floor. This is a strange detail, Scott. I think you may have been trying to be a bit too cryptic here.
Moving on to Five Nights at Freddy's 2, Toy Chica's beak would go missing when leaving the stage. Nobody could explain why this happened and left it to simply a glitch or something Scott overlooked. However, it appears this was all planned all along.
Think back. What are we seeing in the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 Nights 3 minigame? We are seeing this toy Chica missing her beak. Does this not seem a bit coincidental? Also, think of the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 name of this animatronic generation. Toy.
To get straight to the point, we are suggesting that Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was nothing more than the imagination of the child we play as in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. The reason Toy Chica has no beak in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is because this is how the child saw this toy in the playground.
Another link we can bring to attention is the fact that on Night 6 in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the phone guy mentions that there is one last event scheduled before the place closes down. A birthday party.
Throughout Five Nights at Freddy's 4, we are counting down to a party. Also in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the phone guy says a yellow suit was used and that none of the animatronics are acting right. At this point in the timeline, many of us linked the golden suit to Golden Freddy, an entity that would appear in your office and fade like a ghost. He would also appear as a giant head at the end of the hallway, further backing up that this is nothing more than a paranormal entity.
However, there is one suit that we can link to both being yellow and destructive. Fredbear.
Let's also think about the Foxy minigame in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. We know this child to be tormented by the brother with a Foxy mask. Isn't it strange how in the Foxy Go 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 minigame, we can see Foxy supposedly killing the children with a person watching and smiling?
What if the pink guy is a representation of the crying child's brother?
Let's really think about Five Nights at Freddy's 3 now as a game. I mean, really think. We are a night guard at a new horror attraction named Fazbear's Fright. Okay, that's pretty cool. We've got some artifacts from the old pizzerias, drawings, training tapes, and what the hell is this?
Even at a first glance, we can tell that this is no horror prop, nor is it an animatronic robot controlling this. This is the result of a crushed human being inside an animatronic suit with his muscle tissues and organs hanging out all over the place. Why was this not picked up on the phone calls?
You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
Yes, phone dude, you may have found a real one, but there's a person in there. Call an ambulance or something. Forget the Pi of 87. This guy's been crushed beyond belief. I mean, how is this guy even alive?
Let us also remember that this is an attraction where teenagers and passers-by can come and have a wander around and get spooked by the props that lay within. Do the owners of this attraction really believe that no one will pick up on the flesh and muscle wrapping around this animatronic's body? Not to mention it probably smells worse than a portaloo at a music festival.
Ugh. It is this point alone that makes us believe that this game is way too far-fetched. And yes, we are well aware of the whole story of Five Nights at Freddy's appearing a bit far-fetched, but this is the point we've been trying to get across this whole time. It's nothing more than a figment of a child's imagination.
Think about the steps we must take to get the good ending. Number dials within wall panels, traversing through pictures on walls, pushing sequences on an arcade machine. Do you not think that this is a bit unrealistic?
And thinking more about the pictures, if we were to agree that the whole story is derived from the imagination of a child, then it doesn't really need to make sense. The pictures on the walls we see really tell the story. It is only when we click on them that the child's imagination kicks in and begins to tell a story from them.
Drawings are a way younger children can express their thoughts and ideas, and within the picture they create is a story that sits alongside it, hence why we have minigames in Five Nights at Freddy's 3.
This doesn't necessarily mean that the minigames mean nothing though. One that stands out to us the most is the Mangle's Quest.
We have linked this minigame to Five Nights at Freddy's 4 for multiple reasons. The main reason being the window panels we see in the background, they are very familiar to the house we see in the Plush Trap minigame.
Also, when we traverse outside of the walls, we are greeted to a red screen, which is very similar to the title screen of Five Nights at Freddy's 4. The biggest giveaway is the fact that we see a dismantled Mangle in the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 minigames when you walk into the right room.
Maybe the green shirt blue jeans guy represents his brother who terrorizes him throughout the game.
Going back to Five Nights at Freddy's 3, we are introduced to training tapes that the phone dude planned on playing throughout the establishment as people walk through. However, the information given within these tapes could potentially explain how the child truly died. Liquid can cause the spring locks within the suits to snap without warning. We know this child to do nothing more than cry, so who is to say that one of them tears didn't cause the suit to snap with the child in Fredbear's mouth?
Speaking of Fredbear, what if we were to tell you that there was no such establishment where Freddy and the gang existed?
Now, this does sound crazy, and when first hearing this, it does make you question the IQ of the person making that statement. However, let's try and think about this.
If we are suggesting that Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is the only establishment to actually exist in the whole of the timeline, then does it sound so crazy? We know that in this game/universe that there are only two functioning animatronics that can be both worn as a suit and animatronic.
These characters are Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. The only other mention of other animatronics is from a television show we can find in Night 3 at the Crying Child's house. This TV show is called Fredbear and Friends.
Now once again, if this truly is the only correct story in the timeline, then could we possibly suggest that Bonnie, Chica, Foxy and Freddy were actually inspired into this child's nightmares from the TV show Fredbear and Friends?
We know what you're all thinking. What about the toys the child is playing with in the playground?
Well, what if we were to tell you that these toys were nothing more than merchandise from this TV show? Just like Barbie or Action Man, there are different forms of toys available, hence why in the Crying Child's room we see plushie versions of these characters. And what is it that this child calls these teddy bears when we walk over to them? His friends.
This also explains why we see these animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and 1 moving around so freely, because the TV show Fredbear and Friends showed these characters presumably moving around.
4 games, 1 story. This sentence alone describes the wild imagination of a child backed up by what is seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood in the eyes of a child. The child is imagining it.
So you may be thinking, what about all of the other theories? Was that a waste of time? Well, no actually. While all this time we have not been solving the mystery of the Five Nights at Freddy's story, we have in fact been decrypting the thoughts of a delusional child who is crippled with fear over being stuffed into a suit from people who are actually innocent.
The only guilty people in this story are the bullies that forcefully pushed this crying child into Fredbear's mouth and encouraged the thoughts of fear into the child's mind.
So let's think back to Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and the good ending. Do you not think the process we have to go through is strange? Clicking on posters and being transported into 8-bit minigames and dialing in a number sequence into the wall panels. This is quite literally the creativity of an overthinking child. We experience what he envisions when looking at these photos. It doesn't really need to make sense because it isn't actually real.
Five Nights at Freddy's 3 could simply be the child reflecting his story onto someone else. We need to think. Liquid can loosen the locks of these suits and cause a forceful lock onto anything in the suit. We need to think back to this purple guy. He is seen as a bad guy from Five Nights at Freddy's 2 onwards, and if we had to suggest that this is the works of a child's mind, then we know that this crying child believes this man to be a killer. So who better to be pictured dying in a similar fashion to how he did than the man who he is terrified of?
And the fact that this purple man is still alive after 30 years of the place closing down shows a lack of realism to the games we play. Are we really led to believe that this man survived this ordeal, let alone live out the 30 years? It is simply the thoughts of the child and the anger he feels when being the victim.
So, all in all, the countless theories on the internet were not wrong. They were just revealing to us the little parts in the bigger picture.
The bigger picture being that we play as the child from Five Nights at Freddy's 4 making these games come to life from his own fears and anger. We are not saying this is the 100% truth, oh no, because we may never know the truth of Five Nights at Freddy's, but this theory is definitely one to consider.
And with that being said, we can finally put Five Nights at Freddy's to rest. We've had an incredible journey from start to finish, and there will not be a game with such depth for years to come, but you can certainly guarantee that we will be covering it if there is.
So to all of you who subscribe to us for Five Nights at Freddy's, we would truly like to thank you. Without your support, we would not be where we are today, and for that we are eternally grateful. We do of course hope you stick around to view our other gaming analysis episodes, which will be coming out very soon. Until then, keep theorizing, and we will of course see you in our next video.
Goodbye guys.